Welcome back to first year undergraduate microeconomics. In this presentation we continue the mathematics of profit. Remember that economic profit is simply total revenue minus total cost. Last time we looked at total revenue, this time we're looking at total cost. Our total cost has two parts. The first bit, denoted here by capital F, are fixed costs. The second part, denoted here by this function, are the variable costs. What's the difference? Fixed costs are simply those costs that do not depend on output. For example, if you need to buy a piece of equipment that costs you $1 million before you can produce any output, then the cost of that equipment, the $1 million, is a fixed cost. Fixed costs can either be sunk or they can be avoidable. A sunk cost is one that can never be recovered. Even if you stop all production, you can't get that cost back. You can't avoid that cost. In contrast, an avoidable cost is one that you don't pay if you stop all production. Let's give a simple example. Consider that piece of equipment that you need before you can do any production. Suppose it costs you $1 million. Let's say you've bought that equipment and then you suddenly say, changed my mind. I don't want to produce anything. You could try and sell the equipment. If you were able to sell the equipment for $600,000, then you'd be able to avoid the cost of $600,000 simply by stopping production and selling the equipment. $600,000 of the $1 million is avoidable. But of course you paid more than $600,000 for the equipment, you paid $1 million. So the difference, the amount you could not recover, the $400,000, well, it's just gone. It's a sunk cost. Even if you stop production, you can't get that $400,000 back. The best you can do is avoid or recover $600,000 of a capital cost of $1 million. So $600,000 is the avoidable cost, $400,000 is sunk. The second part of our total costs are our variable costs. Variable costs simply depend on how much output you're producing. That's why we've written them here as a function. The total variable costs depend on the total amount that you're producing, unlike the fixed costs, which don't change as you change production. Remember, when we're talking about costs, we're talking about opportunity costs. So our total costs, our fixed and our variable costs, include all opportunity costs. That's different to what you learn in accounting. For example, let's say you use your own capital. Instead of having to borrow $1 million to buy the equipment, you've saved $1 million. And so you go out and buy the equipment with your saving. You use your own capital. There's a cost of using that capital. You could have put that capital in the bank. You could have invested in the share market. You could have bought a house or some other use with that $1 million. The best alternative foregone when you use $1 million to buy the equipment to start a business, that's an opportunity cost of $1 million. That has to be included in your total costs from an economic perspective, not from an accounting perspective though. Remember, accounting costs and accounting profits are what are important for the tax man. But if you're thinking about whether a business is successful or not, you have to look at their economic costs, and that includes all opportunity costs. We can think about average cost. The average total cost is simply the total cost divided by the amount you're producing, given by this formula here. And that's simply going to be the average fixed cost plus the average variable cost. You can think about marginal cost. Marginal cost is simply the change in the total cost when we increase output by 1 unit. Mathematically, it's a change in the total cost when we increase output by 1 unit, the derivative of total cost with regards to quantity. That's clearly going to be the change in fixed cost when we produce 1 more unit, plus the change in variable costs when we produce 1 more unit. Hang on a sec. That's going to be easy. We know what the change in fixed costs are when we produce 1 more unit. They're 0. Because, by definition, they're fixed costs. They don't change when you produce more. Our marginal cost is simply going to be the change in our variable costs when we produce 1 more unit of output. Now that's going to depend on our technology, and we're going to talk about some different technologies in a couple of presentations. But that'll do us for today. See you next time.